And it's important that, we find ways to, get these guys and their thoughts and their information down before, it's too late. So I think that's what's neat about talking to Von Hagen and Lang now and getting information from them. And but yeah, I heard Captain Jack, he saw and was around for all of it.
He had an amazing. The only guy that could get close to him was Greg Lee. Greg Lee had either a photographic memory or something. He could remember plays in games that were on their way to getting into the semis. I don't know how he could do it. He was amazing. But Captain Jack, I don't know how he did it either. He must have either written it down and memorized it. I don't know, but he knew things that every time we thought we knew, he would. If he corrected us, we knew that he knew. So we'd just go, okay. He was that good. He was that good. He knew everything, and he was a pretty amazing guy. Funny guy, good guy, but he knew that the sport. So now the guys that you've got that you can capture what happened. You got Von Hagen. I listened to a lot of the tapes. Ronnie knows a lot of stuff that I don't think any of us knew. He goes back to guys that, Bernie Holtzman, and back to Manny Sands and people that we barely even knew their names, but we knew who they were.
Dave Bordwell seems to be a name of someone he's always fond to talk about.
Yeah, those guys, I saw those guys play a little when I was young and I wasn't playing. Bordwell was not a very tall guy. There's another guy who's a good friend of mine. I can't think of his name. Spike Bortz. I don't know if that name came up.
Yeah.
Spike Bortz was very short, but he could jump, and Bordwell could jump. Spike and Bortz and Bordwell, they could play together, and they were the two smallest guys that could beat guys out there that were much, much taller and bigger.
Wasn't Bobby Garcia somewhat of a smaller guy, a 5'9", 5'10" guy too?
Yeah, he wasn't 5'10". I can tell you that right now.
There's no way like maybe 5'9". I saw a picture. A friend of mine, Mike Hayes, had recently sent me the Sands of Time, the first edition of that, and that's been kind of neat to read. And Bobby was one of the pictures of one of the people that I've been reading up on from that time period, which is always kind of neat to see,
Bobby was a right-sider, and he could play. I remember he was like the other guys. He could get up, hit the ball, and maybe he didn't hit it hard, but he hit it where you weren't. That's the way these guys played. They learned to play with what they had. And some of these guys did really well with what they had, and other guys did okay and maybe didn't get as far as they wanted. But that was the guy, Bobby, I told you. He was the guy that told us to serve the sky ball. That was one of the reasons we won the Manhattan Open.
The smoker wasn't working in that one until later, but the sky ball did, huh?
Yeah, the smoker wasn't. They just laughed at it. These guys laughed at my smoker. These guys going, okay, well, you could follow a spin serve. You know what a spin serve was going to do. You just had to follow it, so it wasn't going to float or move around on you. So really, that was a very hard serve to make somebody that's really good on the other side crack on. No, you had to serve a floater, or you had to serve line serves. You had to serve rainbows, sometimes very short serves, but very rarely did you ever hit and then sky balls, but rarely did you ever serve a spinner because everybody could watch it. So, nope, that's how that one went. It was pretty interesting.
Yeah, well, to have your name on the pier is a pretty special thing. And are you affiliated with Fonz's now?
No.
The restaurant?
No, how that came up was when I was inducted into the Hall of Fame. That was one of the guys, I think it was Rick. He's the commentator. RC, no, it wasn't RC. Anyways, he was the commentator. Jim Arico, pardon me, Jim Arico. Mm-hmm. He was the guy in the ceremonies on the introductions, and he was the guy that said, and here's Fred. If you don't see him on the court, you'll see him at Fonz's holding court, talking about real estate or golf or whatever, and that's because for a long time in the last 3 years, I used to go to Fonz's Friday and Saturday night, sit on the bench, have a glass of wine, and then go and have dinner, and then go home. It was like a fixture. I enjoyed it. It was fun. It was simple, and I knew what to do, and it was great. You could see people. So that's how that became it. But my friend Danny that owned it, he ended up selling it, so now it's kind of a different situation. But no, I had no affiliation with Fonz's.
Okay, well, yeah, the reason I ask is, now that you're selling real estate in the South Bay, how cool is that to, just walk on over there and be able to see your name up there with Bright and O'Hara and Von Hagen and, and everyone else. That's a pretty amazing. It doesn't get any better than that. The Wimbledon of beach volleyball. So congratulations to you. That's pretty impressive for a guy who picked the game up late like that, just because he couldn't go out in the water.
That was a true story. It's funny because I don't really ever go out to watch that thing on the pier. I go out there if I'm walking out with a girlfriend or a friend of mine. We're out there, then I'll point it out, or I'll tell them to go look for something. Go look over there. And then you are proud of it. I mean, obviously that's something they can't ever take away, and it's a golden moment in your life. But I really don't resort back to talking about it much. If I'm talking to it like you or somebody else about volleyball, and we go into the catacombs of the past and we can bring it up, and then stuff like that comes up, because all my friends always say, you realize he won the Manhattan Open. They still do that. When I'm talking to somebody, they're going, you realize you're talking to a guy that... I said, Bobby, whoever it was at the time, just don't say anything. It's not that it's embarrassing, it's just I don't live in the past. I really appreciate what happened, and it becomes a part of the conversation. Scott, then I'll talk about it, but I'm in real estate now. That's what I do for a living, and I want to be merited on what I do now. The volleyball is part of your life. Great. It helps me coordinate with some of the people coming from other areas that learn the sport. And they said, did you ever play volleyball? I said, well, I played a little bit out there. I enjoyed it. But I don't ever resort back to it. Probably because I don't need to. I think
you got other important things going on in your life now, which is, not everyone could say that. Someone like Bergman, look what happened to his life when he didn't have the sport anymore. That's, as sad as that is to bring up.
It was sad. And Henry was really not a talkative guy. He didn't say much. He was kind of I think I wrote in that little blurb on Messenger, I said, quiet guy with a big arm. I mean, the guy, he was known for what he did, and he did it very well. Outside of that, I don't think Henry had much of a life. I'm not even sure if he lived with his mom or what. Really doesn't matter. But I remember driving down Santa Barbara State Street one day and seeing Henry on his bike riding. Just looked like he was just enjoying himself. So I don't know all the situations happened afterwards, but I don't think he had a lot of other interests. And I don't know what that comes from. Is it because I don't know if there was any drugs? I don't know if it was alcohol. I don't think so. But regardless, when you're stuck with one thing in your life and you haven't gone to another thing, you're living in the past. And I don't ever want to live in the past. I'm proud of the past. I love the past. Talking to you about the past is great. All the guys and girls that we met that were part of it, they're the greatest people I've ever met in my life. The best athletes I've ever seen. But that was then, and this is now. So it's a reflection. It's not a desire to live there.
Right. You can go wade back in it from time to time, but just can't stay there.
No.
Good advice. Let's, I know you could probably list 50 as opposed to just 5, but if you had to list the 5 best hitters that you faced or got to watch at some point in your career, who would they be, and then who would be in your top 5 defenders list?
Hitters would be Henry Bergman, not in any particular order, by the way. Henry Bergman, Tom Shamalis. See, I'd have to clarify this one. Hardest hitters or best hitters? Because Greg Lee was one of the great hitters, but he wasn't the hardest hitter by any means. So if you're talking about the hardest hitters, if that's the category you're reflecting, Tom, Henry, Kurt Kilgore, that's 3. Let me think of the other guys who we're playing with. Hard hitters. Dane Selznick was a hard hitter. He was really a hard hitter. And Tim Spies. Let's put those 2 guys in there. Tim Spies hit a ball like a freaking rocket. I mean, it hurt.
He was a lefty, correct?
He was a lefty, and he's a good friend of mine, went to El Segundo. And that guy hit a ball as hard as anything I've ever seen. I mean, they're all quick, and Dane hit a really hard ball. Dane hit a really, really hard, quick snap ball. So I'd say those 5 guys right now. Dane would probably could be interchangeable with a number of different guys, but for now it'd be those 5.
All right, so 5 hardest. Who were just the 5 best offensive players then, if you had to pick. You mentioned Jimmy Menges was one of those guys that could, like a Tom Glavine pitcher in his prime, where he had every pitch and every corner of the plate, it sounds like.
Yeah, so if you're talking now the 5 best offensive players, I'd put Jimmy there. I'd put Ron Lang there. I'd have to put Vonnie there too, because they didn't win games by hitting balls into other guys digging. They put balls that were hit hard, but in places that you couldn't get. So I'd say Ron and Ron, Jimmy. Now this is I'm going to tell you, next 2 guys weren't really in my era, but if you're talking about, did they have to be in my era?
They can be any era. You've seen, and from what I understand, done some coaching, and so you've probably seen a lot over the years.
Yeah, I've seen it. Gene Selznick was ridiculous. That guy had more talent than, you've heard the stories. They say he's one of the best of all time. I didn't see him in his prime, but I saw him in his closest prime. He could work the ball. You couldn't even, he's just like a joke. He could just like pull you on a string. He had a great hit, but he also had great shots. He just had command of the ball. So those guys, he and Jim and Ron, and if I had to pick another guy, just trying to think, there's so many guys that were so good.
You mentioned Greg Lee was a heck of a hitter, huh?
I'd have to say probably Greg, because Greg, he'd hit a ball. Most of the time he'd hit a ball, but he'd hit it where you couldn't get it. And he had shots, but he didn't use shots very much. Usually when the ball's up there, Greg just kept hitting away. But he was a great offensive player. I mean, he didn't get dug very much. See, I wouldn't put Tom and those guys in it because they were hard hitters, but they didn't have a lot of shots beside that. They had them, but they weren't as effective as some of the guys we just named. I think those 5 guys, I'm sure I'm leaving guys out that were very commanding on the offense. But they were really good. Hooper was pretty good. He could control the ball pretty well. He was a pretty good offensive player. But again, because of his size, even though he could hit it, he was a little more readable. Some of the other guys were just shot makers and hitters, and they had the whole game. So that's who I'd give you those 5.
And defenders.
Wow. Defenders.
Yeah.
Ron Lang was probably one of the all-time best I've ever seen.
What made him so good? What did he do?
You know what? I don't know. He was always in the right place. That's all I can tell you. I remember watching him. He'd be down in the sand, and he was in the sand. He was bending down. His knees were in the sand, and he'd put his hand out and dig it with one hand. This is what caught my attention when I first saw volleyball. The ball's coming down at a speed, when Rundle's hitting it and Bergman's hitting it, that ball was down, but he'd pop it up with one hand. I mean, he'd go straight up in the air. He would just wow the crowd. So he was probably one of the best of all kind. Jimmy was very good at defense. Jimmy could get balls. He was quick. He stayed close to the court in the middle, so he cut down about 3/4 of the court. If it went over his hands, it usually went out, so we all knew that when you're a middle court digger or overhand. So he was a very good defensive player. Hooper was crazy. He could dig. That's why they call him Scoop when he was first coming into volleyball. Scoop. That was his nickname. He could dig everything. He was great. I mean, he was very, very exceptional to the defense. So I've got Ron,
Menges,
Hoopy. I gotta think. Now it gets into there's so many good players. I think, who were the guys that were you couldn't get the ball? Oh, Matt Gage, he was another guy. He just knew where to go, and he could dig it overhand, underhand. He could run. He sensed where the ball was going. And I played about 4 or 5 tournaments with Matt, and I think every one we played, we got third, every one. And he was in, you had to pay attention because he would get balls that you would kind of ride off that was gone, and you have to be ready to go set. Kind of what I did with Ron when I first played with him. I never thought he could get to the balls he got to, so I'd stand around looking around. A couple of times he looked at me, he goes, come on. I said, Ronnie, I didn't think you could get it. Sorry, but yeah, he was so fast. I mean, I had to learn a whole different game. Never think the ball's down when he's on the other side of the court.
He would just run stuff down like that.
He ran it down like a gazelle. I mean, he didn't look like a fast guy. He was muscle bound, and he was lithe versus muscle crazy. But the guy was so fast. I mean, ridiculously fast. He was deceiving. That's what I mean. You would expect some guys to be quick. He was so fast and you didn't expect it. That's why he was so good. He got things on defense, and if he's looking at just putting the ball down and can do that and then have that speed on the defensive side, that's a tough guy to beat. And when his partner's as good as he is, that's a tough team to beat.
Was Gary Hooper the guy that would go to the Santa Barbara matches dressed in like a cape and a helmet as Dr. Dig or something like that and challenge people to...
I'm trying to remember. Was that him? It could have been. I don't know. I put nothing past Hoopy. Hoopy was a rare individual. He had a whole different persona. He was so. I played with him once in a tournament. It was the Legends tournament in Laguna Beach. I don't even know how they came up with this. It was like 5 teams or 6 teams. And he and I were supposed to play together. We didn't design it. They told us who we were playing with. And he would yell at me so loud, "Get that ball. You're not getting that ball. You're wussing out." I mean, stuff like that. And I finally had to look over and say, "Gary, if you talk to me one more word, I'm going to smack you." I did. I said it in the middle of the match. He was so intense that he would tell you, like, he would yell at OB all the time. OB just would turn around and say, "So what?" Didn't care. He rolled off his back, but Hoopy would go after his partner. He was an interesting guy, but a very good athlete. I'll tell you, he's an incredible athlete.
He liked the
longest arms I've ever seen in a guy. Longest. He's like his little 5'9" or 10 body. His arms would go up like this guy's 6'2". I mean, it was incredible.
He liked to take a drag of a cigarette every now and then after a match too, didn't he?
In the earlier years, I think he did. Then I think he put it away. I don't know if he ever put it away because of his girlfriend or because people said that ain't cool, or I don't know. But rarely. And sometimes I'm sure it wasn't a cigarette. I'm sure it was something else. So Hoopy was rare. Hoopy was rare. I remember one time, this is a God's truth, I was playing in Laguna Beach, and Gary was playing, and I don't know, we were waiting for the next round or something, and I see this ambulance come up. It was an ambulance or EMT come up, and I see Gary walking over, and the guy's walking him over. And I said, "Well, what happened?" Someone said, "He hit himself in the stomach so hard, he strained his muscles." The God's truth. He hit himself, not somebody else. He hit himself. I've seen him do it before. We've all done it. But he either didn't tighten up enough. He hit himself so hard in the stomach, he strained the muscle, and they had to take him off.
Wow.
You go find anybody else who remembers that story, because I remember it, and I didn't know if I was laughing at the time or if I was just, my jaw was at the ground. I couldn't believe anybody could do that. Although Hoopy, you could see him doing it.
He was wired that way.
What's that? He was wired that way, yeah. Remember, I told you, certain guys on competition, there's a guy who didn't want to win, who wanted to win more than anything in the world. And there's the guys that don't want to lose. And I don't know which one had the bigger drive. I think the guys that were afraid to lose had an extra battery pack because they were so afraid of losing that they would play a level almost above the talent that they had. And some guys had such good talent, they would play a lot. Mingus was like that. He'll probably hate it if I said that, but he hated to lose so bad that I think he actually played better because of his fear. When he lost, you couldn't talk to him for 30 minutes. You couldn't even get in the neighborhood. He'd be the guy at the party still talking about it. He goes, "I can't believe that guy beat me." Rarely did he ever say that guy beat me because he won almost every tournament. But I just remember talking to him. I played with him once. I played the right side. And we talked about it in Santa Barbara because his partner was gone, Greg was gone, and Dennis wasn't going to play. So I said, "Well, let's play." He says, "Can you play the right side?" I said, "I can play the right side." So we took third at Marine. And again, I thought third was pretty good. He hated it. I said, "Jimmy, we didn't do that bad. We didn't play together. I'm on the right side. We got third." He goes, "Yeah, we could have won it." I said, "Well, possibly." He just had a different look at things. Losing wasn't an option. Let's put it that way. He would have been a great Navy SEAL. Losing is not an option.
Right?
Yeah, absolutely.
You had mentioned the 68 Manhattan Beach Open, and like from everything I've ever read and heard, that was what was considered to be like there's never been more impeccable, perfectly played volleyball than what Lang and Von Hagen and Bergman and Rundle exhibited that day. You were there and watched that match and those matches.
I was in the stands. I remember it. Yeah.
They beat them in the finals of the winners, Von Hagen and Lang, and then they played them again in the finals. So it was literally like 6 hours of volleyball.
Oh no, it went forever. I don't remember who won, and I don't remember what bracket they were in. I was just because I was so young in the game. I just remember the game. I was so infatuated. And remember, this was played in a semi-dark. So you've got people on the sidelines watching, and a ball was hit, and then there was a dig, and all you heard was somebody yelling, "Go get it, go get it!" And then we realized it was done. A lot of the times you couldn't even see it. It was that dark. But there on the court, they could see it pretty well. I mean, it was ridiculous. It was absolutely ridiculous. You had 4 surgeons on the court, surgeons, and playing in the dark when nobody else could see and they could still play. I mean, that's, like I said, they had to go up and turn the lights on in the parking lot so that it would at least put out a glow where you could see the ball being played. I mean, that was nuts. Like I said, I don't even remember who won the tournament. But those 4 players instilled, and I'm sure not just me, I'm sure a lot of guys, a lot of gals, a lot of people. That was the best volleyball I had ever seen. To this day, I think the best I'd ever seen. And I didn't even understand it. I just knew it looked good.
That's the sad part about this. You know, if you hear about these great baseball games or NFL games or college basketball games from the 50s, 60s, 70s, there's like some black and white footage of it somewhere and you can see it, you know, on NFL Films or ESPN Classic or something somewhere. And for this stuff, it's like all you've got is the people who were there and their stories, and you know, if there's a couple Robbie Hudis or Artie Cuvion photos out there, but it doesn't do it nearly the justice. So that's why I appreciate being able to hear it right from the mouth of, you know, great players like you who saw it with their own 2 eyes. It's pretty amazing stuff.
I think if you ask most of the players that, you know, average, good, whatever, they're all going to be able to tell you the truth. If they do tell you the truth, they're going to tell you that probably the best games they saw weren't ones that they played in. You have to recognize that, you know, there's a time to be realistic. You know, I mean, yes, you could say, well, I did great, we did great, and that's wonderful, but really, let's talk about who really was that kind of a player. And some of these players ahead of us, you know, I didn't play against Mike Bright, but I saw him play. I didn't play a lot against Butch May, but I saw him play. O'Hara, I saw play. Mike was a good player. And also I saw Keith Erickson play. Now, Keith Erickson and Gene Selznick, that was like watching, you know, oversized players. Keith was, Gene wasn't, but they looked like it when they were playing. It looked like they were playing against kids, but the other side was playing almost as well and a different look. So we'd all looked at these guys as being the great players. Now everyone's going to tell you, and I'm sure they're probably accurate right now, the best all-around given player in volleyball was probably Karch. Now I've heard the story what Ronnie said. They said he thinks it was Gene Selznick. I can't compete with that argument because I don't know. I didn't see Gene Selznick, so maybe if I would have saw him, I might have thought differently. I know that he was called Mr. Volleyball, and I heard he could do everything. So he might have been better all around than Karch. I don't know. But all I know is I saw Karch play in indoor and outdoor, and he was pretty amazing. I mean, he didn't look that amazing. He didn't look that devastating. But he had the same logic. He could find where you weren't, and he could put the ball away. He could dig balls. He just had a second knowledge of the game. But my point earlier was there's so many good players, and they all are good in their own ways. Not everybody was a top-notch player and winner, but each guy had his talent level, and he played to the best of his ability. And if you got to the AAA ranks, Scott, anytime you got to the AAA ranks, that's one thing. To repeat it and get it a couple more times, you validated it. Some of these guys got it, 10, 12, 13 times. So these were good players, but they were all different. It's hard to describe. Every baseball player is different. Every, wide receiver is different.
Right.
They all have certain things in common. But the volleyball game was just different. It was amazing to watch the little guy go up against the big guy and beat the big guy, and then watch the big guy, come back and beat another big guy. It was just a great sport to watch great athletes. And by the way, I think volleyball players, in my opinion, are the best athletes all around. They all played basketball. A lot of them played tennis. A lot of them played other sports, which gives them their hand-eye coordination. And then they got into volleyball, which on the sand is probably one of the hardest sports you can play all day long, jumping out of the sand for all day. That's probably the best athlete that I've seen. And I'm not saying it because I'm prejudiced because I played. I'm talking about the other guys. I just think those are the best athletes.
I'd have to agree with you, specifically on the beach volleyball side. Speaking of the big guy and the little guy, when they incorporated the rule changes to the smaller court and rally scoring around 2001 or 2002, whenever that was, what are your thoughts on the game since then as far as beach goes? And then I'd be curious to hear your take on if you played old rules like you played, big court, side out scoring, best out of 3 to 11 or 1 game to 15, what would your strategy be against a team like Lucena and Dahausser?
I'd run.
No, you wouldn't bust out the sizzler,
just give them a trophy,
the smoker?
Thanks for letting me play second. No, my smoker wouldn't even get close to those guys. You got to know, man. Like Dirty Harry said, man's got to know his limitations. The rules, I like the game of volleyball. I don't go down and watch it much, but I have. I really like watching it on TV because the fortunate part of TV is you get to do the replays and they hone in on slow motion, and it's really good. You get to see a lot of the sport that you don't see because when you're watching it, there is no replay, right? So you kind of want to see it that way. I don't mind the rule changes on the rally scoring. It's a different kind of a game. It's faster. They did it for TV. They didn't do it for any other reason. It was done for television because you couldn't go 2 hours with one match side out. Nobody would watch it. Nobody would record it. So they had to do that for television. And it became, I thought, interesting. You still had good games. And the only issue I had was once somebody got off on a really good run, like say you got off on a 5-6-0 run, it's pretty hard to beat those guys now. They've got such a lead that if it just sides out back and forth, they're just going to win by the numbers. The short court, I'm not a fan of the short court because I think what it did is it took away the need to move. And that's the big player and the guy who's a less, smaller player could cover more court. It was more easy to watch him, a lot easier to watch him go back and get a ball in the background and come up and play and be able to compete in that size. Now that you've got the court short and smaller, they did that because they wanted more defense. I don't care what they say, I'll never believe anything other than they wanted more defense. Now the big guy doesn't have to move 13 feet, he only has to move 5 feet. And they can cover the wingspan, so you're going to see a lot more digs. True, the serves are going to fall a little short, but that's not how a lot of these teams win by serves. It's by digging and passing and putting the ball down. So I'm not a fan of it, but the one thing that I don't like, and I think it's the worst rule they've ever put in volleyball, is the point that gets off the tape and falls down.
Oh, the let serve?
I hate that. Here's why I don't like it. And I think it actually happened in the Olympics. I'm not 100% sure because I don't remember. But let's say you're watching the gold medal or you're watching the Manhattan Open, and it's just been a great game like the 68 game we're talking about, or any of the great games that you've had so many. Now you got a guy going back. The people have been out there for an hour and a half, whatever. And a guy goes back and he serves, and let's say he even misses. Well, he's probably not trying to hit the tape because nobody has that quality, that talent. He hits the tape, it rolls in, the game's over. Wow, what an exciting finish. I just don't think that that's the way to play the game.
Oh, I agree.
I don't see any reason to even put that in because they do it indoors. A lot of the guys, I think the FIVB had something to do with that. Because it's indoors, they brought it outdoors. I don't think, if you ask the outdoor players, I'll bet you if they were really honest, Scott, I don't think they like it. I think in other words, you're being rewarded
for a mistake.
The net is there as an impediment to get around. It's there as a barrier to get around and play around. Same in tennis. So you don't get it in tennis. If you hit it serve in tennis, you serve it over. I mean, there's no logic. I don't see any logic in it at all. Speeds up the game. Well, it doesn't speed up the game that much. There's not that many of them. What's the point? So I think it was interjected through the FIVB, but I'm not 100% sure. I just think that's a terrible rule.
Agreed. So if you were playing Dahausser and Lucena, aside from pulling your Dirty Harry move, what would your game plan be against those guys? You and Bobby Jackson are playing them. You and Von Hagen, whatever. What would the game plan be? Side out scoring, no blocking over.
No blocking. Our rules.
Yeah, your rules. Your rules when you played back in the day when it was best out of 3 to 11, or and then that final game to 15, what have you. What would your strategy be?
I think the very first thing I would go to is a sky ball. I don't know if it affects those guys, but if we serve the sky ball high enough and long enough in the back, they have to pass it all the way to the net and make a better play. I think I would start with that with the guys that size, because you get them anywhere around the net and they hit the ball, they could be 5 feet off the net and it's like another guy being right on the tape. So I think that I would try to consider going deep with a sky ball, or even a roundhouse, a very high floaty serve that comes down the back line. You see them serve that today. It makes the guys back up. They have to decide if it's in or out. If they don't pass it and it falls in, they lose a point. Otherwise, they have to pass it. Now it has to go from the back of the court, 30 feet to the front by the net, and get set well. Yes, they may pull it off 10 times in a row, but if you do it enough, eventually they're gonna fail. To try to serve them off the court, these guys that are big, they're good, they're fast. Though I don't think you're going to serve them off the court. Defense, the only thing you can hope to do is that you got them off the net hitting and you're back defensing. But that's the only thing I think we would do. They wouldn't be able to block over. Our block would be a joke. It'd be like, toy gun against a tank. It wouldn't make any difference. And I'm not belittling us. I'm just saying these guys are so big now, 6'5", and I'm 6'1", and Bobby was 6'3". That's not going to happen. I don't know. We'd have to set the ball further off the net and be able to hit it. Now, we could all hit the ball off the net pretty well. But, the guys now are just so big and so good, I just think it would be very, very difficult to beat guys like that. The guys we had in the back years that were big, they weren't as big as fast as these guys. These guys trained specifically for a whole different way than we played. It's a speed game. And so I just think these guys in full court would be hard to beat. But that would be the strategy. I would serve them deep so they had to always bring the ball. We did that when Dennis and I played. We served everything deep, even though they knew it was coming.
Dennis Hare?
Yeah, they had to bring the ball all the way from the back line, all the way up, get a good set, and your chances of getting a bad set is much easier from back there than it is if you try to serve them in the middle of the court. They're going to pass and set, and it's going to kill you. So I would do it that way if it was me. And I think if you ask Jimmy and Greg, I'd be interested to see what they'd say. I would really be interested to hear what Jimmy says to that.
Yeah, I hope to talk to him next weekend.
Yeah, it'll be interesting. Make sure you ask him that question. I'd be interested to see it. Don't tell him what I said. Just see what he says.
All right, I won't. And then for my final question for you tonight, for those who want to know, what are you up to these days as far as occupation? Where do you live? Hobbies that you're into, and what your life today entails?
Well, a lot of my life today is around my job. I'm a real estate professional. I've been doing it for 36 years. I grew up in the South Bay, so I'm working in the South Bay, PV, El Segundo, Manhattan, Hermosa, Redondo, everywhere. So that's my office, so to speak. So I've been spending my career doing that, and I focus a lot on that. I don't draw much off the volleyball from that because really a lot of the volleyball people are doing different things and live in different areas. But I do that. That's my main focus. When I'm not playing volleyball, when I'm not doing my job, I try to go play golf. I'm as into golf now as I was when I was into volleyball, to be honest with you. It's a tougher sport because it's so many variables. But I like it because it's challenging. Sort of like chess on spikes. You sort of have to figure out how to beat the course, and every day's different, every shot's different. So, and all the volleyball players, most of the guys play golf, I think, because they also realize it's a very strategic kind of game. So my job, my golf, get into volleyball. And then I think, keeping healthy, it's amazing, but I'm 70, and I really find it hard to believe that I'm 70. I look at myself, I see what I can do, I feel what I can do. I feel like I'm 50, but my registration is 70, so I'll live with that. But I feel like I keep my health as much as I possibly can. And that's my life pretty much. I have great friends, some of them from a long time ago, some of them from now, but those are my three focuses and my hobbies. Oh, and I do like cars. I will say that I enjoy cars. That's the other hobby that I have.
You got your own Jay Leno car collection there? Come on, Fred.
No, I've got two cars. I have a Tesla, which is, it's a phenomenal machine. It's just different. And I have a 2017 Shelby GT350 Mustang. And that is a ride. That is so much fun. I can't get out of the driver's seat. When I go someplace, I just want to get in that car and drive.
I can only imagine. I wouldn't want to get out either.
It's a race car. It's built for the track. It's not a drag car. It was really one of the best cars ever built by Ford. All the people that are car people say that's the best engine they've ever built. It's different. Flat plane crank versus a cross plane. But anyways, it's a very unique car. And I got one, and I'm very, very excited with it. Before that, I had a Porsche. Before that, I had a Cobra Roadster. I've had a lot of them. And actually, I've had this one for a year, so everybody thinks, God, you must be in love with that. You haven't changed it yet. Well, I'm looking. But that's another hobby that I enjoy. I get on the road and drive and have fun.
Let me ask you this. Do you have a puka shell necklace hanging from the rearview mirror of that vehicle, Fred?
No, and I never will. I tried to find those one day. Actually, I was trying to find them for a reunion, and I could never find them. I don't even know where they were. The first ones that I wore, I think I mentioned that, maybe it wasn't to you, they really weren't puka shells. What they were, and it's probably just as good to call them donkey beads because of the donkey that wore them, but it was a piece of leather, and I had shells I found on the beach. I was going through a period where I just was earthy, and I found these shells, and I knocked a hole in them with a nail. And these big blue donkey beads, which you could buy at a bead shop, or there's three of them. So it was really shells that really could cut your throat. I mean, it never did. It was on a piece of leather. And then when I got away from that, realized I looked dumb after a number of years, I went and did get puka shells because I bought in Hawaii because I've always gone to Hawaii. So I had the pukas, and it wasn't anything that Mingo would probably say, well, that was your status. No, it wasn't my status. It was just something that I did. Some guys wear bracelets around their ankles and around their wrists, and some guys have certain rings or whatever. I used to have a whale tail around my neck after that, but no, I don't know where those things are, and it was great to be a part of the humor. I'd have to poke a lot of fun at myself because the jokes were great. We got them all the time. So, I'll give you one little quick vignette on what happened. I was playing with Tom Shamalis in the Corona Del Mar Open, and it's the only time I ever played with Tommy. And we got all the way through the tournament, and we were at the very end, and we were playing Von Hagen and Jackson. How's that?
Right.
Opposite partners. It just was freaky. I think it was Jackson. I'm pretty sure it was. And you couldn't see, if you were on the south side, you couldn't see because the sun was setting. And so you had to line your eyes up with the top of the net. You follow what I'm saying here?
Yeah.
You had to kind of, so it shadowed. And it was hot, so I was wearing a bandana, because I had long hair, and some stupid reason, Scott, I was chewing gum. I don't know why. I was, So we're getting ready to receive, and Tommy holds up his hand. He says, wait a minute. He looked up at me, he says, he was laughing. I go, Tom, what's up? What's up? Couldn't understand. He goes, you look like something out of a movie. You look like, what do you call me? Hollywood. You look like something out of Hollywood. And he was laughing. He had to hold his hand up before they served. Well, Von Hagen heard this. He said, what are you guys doing over there? And Tommy says, I don't know. We're just waiting. We're ready to go. And then it stuck, Hollywood. And then I got nicknamed Hollywood after that because I had the hairband, I had the beads, I had the sunglasses on, and I was chewing gum. And Tommy was just, I'll never forget that. He cracked me up. He stopped right in the middle of the serve. So we ended up winning that because it was, again, they didn't finish it, but we were winning, so they gave us the win. We
Okay.
won where it was. So I had a win with him on that one. But that's the last time I remember wearing the beads. I don't think I wore them after that.
They went out on a high note, though, nonetheless.
Went out on a high note, yeah. I got enough static on those things. I think I probably went to a whale's tail by that time. I had a lot of issues I had to deal with.
Yeah, sounds like it. Well, I really appreciate your time tonight. This was phenomenal.
Well, I hope it. Yeah, it was fun. I mean, I get to reminisce and listen a little bit to what happened in my life, and you're asking the right questions that kind of bring it all back. Good questions, by the way. I'll tell you that. I think you talk to any of the guys, you're probably going to get very similar response. They're all going to get a little excited talking about the days of the past because a lot of people, we miss that. I don't know that I'd say I'd want to, if I could do it again right now, I'd do it. I'm glad I did it. I don't think I'd want to do it again because if I could relive it, I wouldn't want to relive it. I liked it. I enjoyed it. I'm glad it's done. I've moved on. Some of the guys, I think, we've talked about a few that might still be living in the past, and other guys have moved on. But it was a great time. And you guys bringing up these questions and these documentaries or whatever it is that you're putting together is a good time. But the guys that you really want to speak to, are you going to get in touch with Ron Lang?
I did. I interviewed Lang once already. I don't know if you ever listened to that interview, but it's on the.
I didn't. That one I would like to see.
Yeah, I will. I'll send you the link as soon as I get off the phone here. I'll send it to your. I'll text message it to you.
That's perfect. Those two guys, Ron and Jimmy, will be your resource for everything that you need to know. All of us will be superfluous information after you get together with those three guys. Ours will be different stories, and different takes. Those guys have the history in their brains, and while they've got them, I would get them.
All right, consider it done.